The 12th Street Police Station was a busy place on Monday morning. Officers rushed around with coffee cups, papers, and loud voices. The walls were old and gray, but the badges on every chest shined bright. For most officers, it was just another day. They didn't know everything was about to change. The station had been run the same way for 15 years. Sergeant Mike Tanner and his friend Sergeant Bill Wilkes made the real rules. They were both tall white men with short hair who had been police officers since their 20s. Now in their 40s, they felt they owned the place. The old captain, Captain Roberts, was leaving for retirement, and they were sure one of them would take his place. Heard anything about the new captain? Officer Green asked as he poured sugar into his coffee. Sergeant Tanner laughed. Probably some paper pusher from downtown. Don't worry about it. Nothing changes around here unless we say so. The other officers nodded. This was how things worked at the 12th. Tanner and Wilkes decided which laws to enforce and where. They were harder on people from the east side of town, where most Black and Hispanic families lived. They let their friends off with warnings instead of tickets. They made their own rules, and their badges protected them. At 9 o'clock, the front door opened. A black man in simple clothes, clean blue jeans, a button-down shirt, and a brown jacket, walked in. He carried a small bag and looked around quietly. No one paid much attention to him. "Can I help you?" the desk officer asked without looking up from her computer. "I'm here to see Officer Garcia," the man said in a calm, deep voice. The desk officer pointed to a hallway. "Down there, third door." The man nodded and walked through the station. As he moved, he watched everything. He saw Officer Miller joke about a woman who had come in to report a stolen bike. Probably her boyfriend took it. Miller laughed. These people always blame others for their problems. The man kept walking. He noticed how Sergeant Wilkes spoke rudely to a young Hispanic man trying to pay a ticket. He saw how the female officers were given the worst jobs. He watched Officer Cooper put a small bag of something in his pocket after it had been logged as evidence. The man found Officer Garcia's desk and sat down across from him. "You must be from downtown," Garcia said, looking nervous. Garcia was one of the few Hispanic officers at the station. He kept to himself and did his job quietly. "Yes," the man said. "I'm just here to observe today." Sergeant Tanner walked over. "Who's this, Garcia?" Before Garcia could answer, the man stood up and held out his hand. "I'm Marcus Johnson. Just visiting." Tanner barely shook his hand. "Well, don't get in the way. We run a tight ship here." "I can see that," Marcus said, his face showing nothing. Throughout the day, Marcus sat in different parts of the station. He watched officers avoid certain calls. He heard jokes about people from poor neighborhoods. He saw paperwork get lost when it involved friends of officers. And he noticed how Tanner and Wilkes were treated like kings. At the end of the day, Marcus thanked Officer Garcia and left quietly. Most officers had already forgotten about him. They went back to their normal routines, laughing and making plans for drinks after work. None of them knew that Marcus Johnson had spent the day taking mental notes. None of them knew he had seen everything. And none of them knew that tomorrow morning they would see Marcus Johnson again, wearing the uniform and badge of their new captain. The 12th Street Police Station was about to change forever. The next morning at the 12th Street Police Station started like any other. Officers filed in, grabbing coffee and talking about sports and weekend plans. Sergeant Tanner stood by the break room door, laughing loudly with his friends. "Meeting in 10 minutes," called the desk officer. "New captain is here." Tanner smiled at Wilkes. "Ready to meet our new boss. Bet he'll need our help to understand how things really work around here." The officers gathered in the main room. Chairs scraped across the floor as everyone found a seat. The room buzzed with talk about who the new captain might be. Most thought it would be someone from another station, maybe an older white officer close to retirement who wouldn't make waves. The side door opened. The room went quiet as Chief Adams walked in. Behind him was Marcus Johnson, the same man who had visited yesterday. But today, he wore a crisp blue uniform with captain's bars on his shoulders and a shiny badge on his chest. "Officers, meet your new captain, Marcus Johnson," said Chief Adams. Captain Johnson comes to us with 15 years of experience and an excellent record. He turned around the 23rd Precinct in just 2 years. I expect you all to give him your full support. The silence in the room was heavy. Faces showed shock, surprise, and for some, anger. Sergeant Tanner's mouth hung open. Officer Green dropped his pen. They had all ignored Marcus yesterday, or worse. Let him see their bad behavior. Chief Adams left, and Captain Johnson stepped to the front of the room. His eyes moved slowly across the faces before him. "Good morning," he said in the same calm, deep voice from yesterday. "Some of you met me yesterday, though you didn't know who I was." He paused. "That was on purpose. I like to see how a station really works before I introduce myself." Officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. What had he seen? What had he heard? "I saw a lot yesterday," Captain Johnson continued. "Some good things, some things that will change." His eyes landed on Sergeant Tanner. "Starting today." Captain Johnson picked up a marker and wrote on the whiteboard. "Respect, service, justice. These are not just words," he said. "These are how we will do our jobs every day, with every person we meet. No exceptions." Sergeant Wilkes raised his hand. "With all due respect, Captain, we have ways of doing things here that work for us." The last captain understood that. Captain Johnson nodded slowly. "And that's why I'm here now, Sergeant Wilkes. Those ways are over." The meeting continued with Captain Johnson laying out new rules. All complaints would be properly filed. Every neighborhood would get equal patrol time. Evidence procedures would be strictly followed, and body cameras would be worn at all times. After the meeting, officers gathered in small groups to talk. Some looked worried, others angry. "He can't just come in and change everything," Tanner said, his face red with anger. "Who does he think he is?" "The captain," said Officer Rodriguez quietly. She was a young Hispanic woman who had kept her head down for 2 years. Today, she looked almost hopeful. In his new office, Captain Johnson hung up his jacket and sat down at his desk. The office was small with old furniture, but it had a window overlooking the street. He could see people walking by, going about their day, trusting the police to protect them. There was a knock at the door. Officer Garcia stepped in, looking nervous. "Captain," he said, "I wanted to say, I'm glad you're here." Captain Johnson smiled for the first time that day. "Thank you, Garcia." "But sir," Garcia continued, lowering his voice, "you should know, Tanner and Wilkes, they won't make this easy for you. They have friends. They've been running things their way for a long time." Captain Johnson's smile faded. "I know. That's why I'm here." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "And I'm ready for them." Outside the office, Sergeant Tanner watched through the window, his eyes narrow with anger. The battle for the 12th Street Police Station had begun. 1 week after Captain Johnson arrived, the 12th Street Police Station was a different place. The halls were quieter. Officers watched what they said. Some tried to follow the new rules, while others looked for ways around them. Captain Johnson sat at his desk early Monday morning, reading reports from the weekend. There was a knock on his door. "Come in," he called. Officer Rodriguez entered, holding a folder. "Sir, I found something you should see." She placed a file on his desk. It contained copies of old complaint forms, at least 20 of them. All had been filed against Sergeant Tanner or officers who worked closely with him. All had been marked resolved, with no action taken. "These were hidden in a storage room," Officer Rodriguez said. "I was looking for old evidence bags and found them in a box marked office supplies." Captain Johnson looked at the complaints. Many were from people in the East Side neighborhood. Complaints about rough treatment, missing property, and rude behavior. Each form had been signed off by Sergeant Wilkes, who was in charge of internal reviews. "Thank you, Rodriguez," Captain Johnson said. This is important. Officer Rodriguez nodded. Sir, there's more. Some officers are still not using their body cameras. They turn them off when they talk to certain people. Captain Johnson frowned. Make me a list of which officers. After Rodriguez left, Captain Johnson called Sergeant Tanner to his office. You wanted to see me, Captain? Tanner asked, not bothering to hide the disrespect in his voice. Captain Johnson pushed the folder across his desk. Care to explain these? Tanner barely glanced at the papers. Old complaints, already handled. Hidden away, you mean, Captain Johnson said. 20 complaints in 2 years, all against you or your friends, all marked resolved with no action. That's not handling them, Sergeant. Tanner crossed his arms. People complain all the time. Doesn't mean they're telling the truth. That's why we investigate, Captain Johnson said. Starting now, I'm reopening all of these cases. Tanner's face turned red. You can't do that. It will ruin good officers' records. If they're good officers, they have nothing to worry about, Captain Johnson said calmly. If they're not, they shouldn't be wearing the badge. Tanner stormed out of the office. By lunchtime, everyone in the station knew what had happened. The station was split. Some officers gathered around Tanner and Wilkes, angry and worried. Others kept to themselves, watching to see what would happen next. That afternoon, Captain Johnson called a meeting. He stood before his officers, face serious. I found evidence that complaints were hidden instead of properly investigated, he said. This stops now. I'm forming a new internal review team. Officer Rodriguez will lead it. Surprised whispers filled the room. Rodriguez was young and had never held a leadership position. Any officer with more than 3 complaints will be reviewed, Captain Johnson continued. Those found to have broken department rules will face consequences. Those who haven't have nothing to fear. Sergeant Wilkes stood up. This is a witch hunt. You're targeting good officers who do the hard work on the streets. Captain Johnson met his eyes. No, Sergeant. I'm making sure every officer follows the same rules and treats every citizen with respect. That's the job we all swore to do. After the meeting, Officer Chen, a young Asian American rookie, approached Captain Johnson in the hallway. Sir, he said quietly, there's something else you should know. Some officers are planning to make things hard for you. They're going to delay responding when you call for backup. They said they'll teach you a lesson. Captain Johnson put a hand on Chen's shoulder. Thank you for telling me. It takes courage to speak up. That night, as Captain Johnson drove home, he noticed a police car following him. It stayed 3 cars behind, lights off. Captain Johnson recognized the car. It was Tanner's. The message was clear. This fight was just getting started, and it was going to get personal. 2 weeks passed. The station felt like a battlefield with invisible lines drawn between officers. Captain Johnson continued pushing for change. Sergeant Tanner and his friends continued pushing back. On Friday night, Captain Johnson was working late in his office. Most officers had gone home. The night shift was out on patrol. The station was quiet except for the soft tapping of his keyboard. His radio crackled. All units, armed robbery in progress at Wilson's Market on Pine Street. Suspect is armed and dangerous. Captain Johnson grabbed his gun and badge. Wilson's Market was only 3 blocks from the station. He could get there quickly. This is Captain Johnson, he said into his radio. I'm responding to Wilson's Market. Copy that, Captain, came the reply. Captain Johnson drove fast, but safely to the market. When he arrived, the store windows were lit, but he saw no movement inside. He parked his car and approached carefully, gun ready. Police, he called as he entered the store. There was no answer. No robber. No store owner. Nothing looked disturbed. Suddenly, Captain Johnson realized something was wrong. He reached for his radio. This is Captain Johnson. Wilson's Market is clear. No sign of robbery. Can someone confirm the call? Static was the only answer. Captain Johnson tried again. This is Captain Johnson. Does anyone copy? More static. His radio wasn't working properly, or someone had switched to a different channel. He was about to leave when he heard a noise from the back of the store. Captain Johnson moved carefully toward the sound, gun raised. "Police, come out with your hands up." The back door of the store burst open. 3 men with masks rushed in, holding baseball bats. "Look who's here all alone," one man said. His voice sounded familiar. Captain Johnson pointed his gun at them. "Drop the bats and put your hands up." The men spread out, moving to surround him. Captain Johnson backed up toward the front door, keeping his gun aimed at them. "No backup coming tonight, Captain," another man said. "Guess they didn't hear your call." Captain Johnson realized then what had happened. The robbery call was fake. Someone wanted to get him alone, and his radio had been tampered with so he couldn't call for help. The first man swung his bat, hitting a display of cans. They crashed to the floor. "We just want to talk, Captain, about how things used to work at the 12th. Captain Johnson kept moving backward. "Take off the masks if you want to talk." The men laughed. Captain Johnson reached the door and backed out onto the sidewalk. The men followed. Suddenly, bright lights flashed on. A police car screeched to a stop at the curb. Officer Rodriguez and Officer Chen jumped out, guns drawn. "Police, drop your weapons," Rodriguez shouted. The 3 men froze. Then they turned and ran back through the store. "Are you okay, Captain?" Chen asked. Captain Johnson nodded. "How did you know I needed help?" "We heard the call about Wilson's Market," Rodriguez said, "but it didn't come through the regular channel. We thought it was strange and decided to check it out." "Good police work," Captain Johnson said. They searched the store but found no one. The men had escaped through the back door, but one had dropped something, a police radio. It was from the 12th Street station. The next morning, Captain Johnson placed the radio on his desk during the daily meeting. Everyone stared at it. "Last night, someone set a trap for me," he said calmly. "They used police equipment to do it. They made a fake call and jammed my radio." The room was silent. "I don't know who they were. They wore masks. But this radio belongs to our station." Captain Johnson looked at each officer. "This isn't about me not liking how things were done before. This is about breaking the law. This is about betraying the badge." He picked up the radio. "I'm having this checked for fingerprints. I'm reviewing all camera footage from the area. And when I find out who did this, they won't just lose their jobs. They'll face criminal charges." For the first time, fear showed in Sergeant Tanner's eyes. The mood at the 12th Street police station changed after the incident at Wilson's Market. Officers watched Captain Johnson with new eyes. Some looked at him with respect, others with fear. The trap at the store had crossed a line that even Tanner's supporters couldn't defend. Captain Johnson sat in his office reviewing security camera footage from streets near Wilson's Market. There were no cameras inside the store, but he hoped to see the masked men as they arrived or left. Officer Rodriguez knocked on his open door. "Captain, there's someone here to see you." A tall man in an expensive suit walked in. "Captain Johnson, I'm Richard Bell, the mayor's assistant." Captain Johnson stood and shook his hand. "What can I do for you, Mr. Bell?" Bell closed the door. "The mayor is concerned about some complaints he's received from officers at this station. They say you're targeting certain officers and causing problems." Captain Johnson wasn't surprised. "I'm enforcing the rules, Mr. Bell. The same rules for everyone." "Of course," Bell said smoothly, "but the mayor values stability. These officers have served the city for many years, and they'll continue to serve if they follow proper procedures," Captain Johnson said. "Does the mayor know about the trap that was set for me at Wilson's Market?" Bell looked uncomfortable. He heard something about that. "Very unfortunate." "Unfortunate." Captain Johnson opened a folder on his desk. 3 men with baseball bats tried to attack a police captain. They used police equipment to set the trap. I could have been seriously hurt or killed. Bell glanced at the folder. "Do you know who was responsible?" Not yet, but I will. Captain Johnson's voice was firm. And when I find them, they'll face charges. I don't care who they know or who protects them. Bell studied Captain Johnson's face. The mayor would prefer if this matter was handled quietly. Inside the department, Captain Johnson understood what Bell was really saying. The mayor wanted this covered up. Maybe Tanner or Wilkes had friends in the mayor's office. Maybe the mayor didn't want a public scandal. Mr. Bell, Captain Johnson said, please tell the mayor that I was appointed to clean up this station. And that's what I'm doing. If he has concerns, he can call me directly. After Bell left, Captain Johnson sat thinking. The pressure wasn't just coming from inside the station now. It was coming from City Hall too. His phone rang. It was Officer Chen. Captain, I think I found something, Chen said excitedly. I was checking the duty logs from the night of the Wilson's Market incident. 3 officers were supposed to be on patrol but didn't answer any calls for 4 hours. Which officers? Captain Johnson asked, though he already guessed. Officer Harris, Officer Diaz, and Sergeant Tanner, Chen answered. Captain Johnson wasn't surprised to hear Tanner's name. Harris and Diaz were 2 officers who always followed Tanner's lead. Good work, Chen, Captain Johnson said. Don't tell anyone else about this. That afternoon, Captain Johnson drove to the East Side neighborhood that had filed many complaints against Tanner and his friends. He parked his car and walked the streets, talking to store owners and residents. Most people were surprised to see a police captain in their neighborhood. Many were nervous talking to him, but some opened up when he explained why he was there. That Officer Tanner, an old woman said, shaking her head. He comes in our stores and takes things without paying. Says it's for protection. A young store owner showed Captain Johnson a broken window. When I complained about officers harassing my customers, this happened the next day. No one investigated. Captain Johnson wrote everything down. He took pictures. He collected names and phone numbers of people willing to make official statements. When he returned to his car, he found Sergeant Wilkes leaning against it. Making friends in the neighborhood, Captain? Wilkes asked with a smirk. Doing my job, Sergeant, Captain Johnson replied. Wilkes stepped closer. You should be careful out here alone. Dangerous neighborhood. Is that a threat? Captain Johnson asked calmly. Just friendly advice, Wilkes said. Then he added in a lower voice, you won't win this fight, Captain. You don't know who you're dealing with. Captain Johnson looked Wilkes in the eye. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and so will everyone else, very soon. As Wilkes walked away, Captain Johnson felt more determined than ever. He had evidence now, not just hidden complaint forms, but real statements from citizens, and he had the duty logs showing which officers were missing during the Wilson's Market incident. The next step would be the hardest, but Captain Johnson was ready. The next morning was unusually quiet at the 12th Street Police Station. Officers spoke in whispers. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. Captain Johnson arrived early. With him was a woman in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. They went straight to his office and closed the door. That's Sarah Washington from Internal Affairs, Officer Rodriguez told Officer Chen. Something serious is happening. Inside the office, Captain Johnson and Ms. Washington laid out all the evidence they had gathered. The hidden complaint forms. The duty logs showing Tanner, Harris, and Diaz were missing during the Wilson's Market incident. Statements from East Side residents about officers taking protection money and harassing people. This is more than enough, Ms. Washington said. We can suspend all 3 officers today while we continue investigating. Captain Johnson nodded. I want to do this by the book. No shortcuts. He had seen too many bad officers get away with wrongdoing because procedures weren't followed correctly. At 10 a.m., Captain Johnson called a station-wide meeting. Everyone was required to attend, including officers just ending night shift and those about to start day patrol. The room was packed. Captain Johnson stood at the front with Ms. Washington beside him. His face was serious but calm. "This morning, with the help of Internal Affairs, I am suspending 3 officers pending investigation into serious misconduct," Captain Johnson announced. Sergeant Michael Tanner, Officer James Harris, and Officer Paul Diaz. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Sergeant Tanner jumped to his feet. "This is a joke," he shouted. "You have nothing on us." Ms. Washington stepped forward. "Sergeant Tanner, we have evidence linking you and these officers to an incident at Wilson's Market 2 weeks ago, where an attempt was made to intimidate Captain Johnson. We also have multiple citizen complaints and evidence of extortion in the East Side neighborhood." "I don't know what you're talking about," Tanner said, but his face had gone pale. "Your radio was found at the scene," Captain Johnson said quietly, "and the duty logs show you and Officers Harris and Diaz were unaccounted for during those hours." Officer Diaz suddenly stood up. He was young, only 3 years on the force. "I want to make a statement," he said, his voice shaking. Sergeant Tanner turned to him. "Shut up, Diaz." "No," Diaz said. "I'm not going down for this." He looked at Captain Johnson. "Sergeant Tanner and Officer Harris planned the whole thing. They said we would just scare you a little, make you back off. I didn't know they were going to bring bats." The room went completely silent. No one could believe Diaz was talking. "You're dead," Tanner hissed at him. "Are you threatening Officer Diaz in front of witnesses, Sergeant?" Ms. Washington asked sharply. Captain Johnson raised his hand for quiet. "Officer Diaz, if you cooperate fully with this investigation, that will be taken into consideration." Diaz nodded, looking relieved. Sergeant Wilkes stood up next. "This is a witch hunt. Captain Johnson has been against us from day one. He's dividing this station." Several officers nodded in agreement, but for the first time, others spoke up against Wilkes. "No, you divided this station," Officer Rodriguez said, "by thinking the rules didn't apply to you, by treating some neighborhoods better than others." Officer Chen added, "by threatening officers who didn't follow your unwritten rules." Captain Johnson let the officers speak. This was important. The station needed to face these issues openly. Finally, he raised his hand again. "Sergeant Tanner, Officer Harris, and Officer Diaz, please surrender your badges and weapons to Ms. Washington. You are suspended with pay during the investigation." "This isn't over," Tanner said as he slapped his badge on the table. "I have friends, important friends." "So do I," Captain Johnson replied. "They're called the Law and Proper Procedure." After the meeting, half the station was in shock. Some officers avoided Captain Johnson. Others came to his office to share more information about Tanner and Wilkes. That evening, as Captain Johnson was leaving, Chief Adams called. "The mayor just called me," the chief said. "He's furious about the suspensions." "I expected that," Captain Johnson said. "He wants to meet with you tomorrow," the chief continued. "And Captain, he's bringing his lawyer." Captain Johnson took a deep breath. The real fight was just beginning. Captain Johnson arrived at City Hall at exactly 9 a.m. The big stone building looked cold and unwelcoming in the morning light. He straightened his uniform and walked up the steps, ready to face the mayor. Inside, the mayor's secretary led him to a large meeting room. Mayor Wilson sat at the head of a long table. Next to him was a man in an expensive suit, his lawyer. Richard Bell, the mayor's assistant, was there too. And at the far end of the table sat Sergeant Tanner, looking smug. "Captain Johnson," Mayor Wilson said without standing. "Please, have a seat." Captain Johnson remained standing. "I didn't expect to see Sergeant Tanner here. He's currently suspended pending an investigation." "That's why we're here," Mayor Wilson said. "This suspension is causing problems." "Problems for whom?" Captain Johnson asked. The mayor's lawyer spoke up. "Captain, the mayor is concerned about the disruption to the police department. Sergeant Tanner has served this city for 20 years. And in those 20 years, Captain Johnson replied, he has collected more complaints than any other officer. He has broken department rules, intimidated citizens, and recently attempted to threaten a superior officer. Me. Mayor Wilson frowned. Those are serious accusations, Captain. But we need to consider Sergeant Tanner's record of arrests and his service to this city. Captain Johnson understood now. The mayor didn't care about the complaints or the broken rules. He cared about arrest numbers that made him look good to voters. Mr. Mayor, Captain Johnson said, I came here out of respect for your office. But this meeting is inappropriate. There is an ongoing internal affairs investigation, and neither you nor I should interfere with it. Tanner smirked. The captain is new here. He doesn't understand how things work in our city. I understand exactly how things have been working, Captain Johnson said. That's the problem. The mayor's face turned red. Captain Johnson, I appointed you to bring stability to the 12th precinct, not to cause chaos. Suspending experienced officers is not what I had in mind. With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, you appointed me to clean up the 12th. That's what I'm doing. The mayor's lawyer cleared his throat. Captain, perhaps we can reach a compromise. Sergeant Tanner returns to duty with a written warning, and in exchange, he dropped his plan to file a formal complaint against you for harassment. Captain Johnson almost laughed. Harassment? I have evidence that Sergeant Tanner and his friends set a trap for me at Wilson's Market, planning to attack me with baseball bats. One of the officers has already agreed to testify. Tanner's smirk disappeared. He hadn't known about Diaz's statement. The mayor looked confused. What trap? What is he talking about, Tanner? Tanner shook his head. Captain Johnson is making this up. He's been against me from day one. Captain Johnson reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. This contains Officer Diaz's signed statement about the Wilson's Market incident. It also contains statements from 12 citizens who have been harassed or forced to pay protection money to officers under Sergeant Tanner's command. He placed the folder on the table. I've brought copies for everyone. I'm also prepared to share these with the press if there is any attempt to interfere with the internal affairs investigation. The room went silent. The mayor stared at the folder but didn't touch it. That sounds like a threat, Captain, the mayor's lawyer said. No, Captain Johnson replied. It's a promise that I will do my job no matter who tries to stop me. Mayor Wilson looked at Tanner, then back at Captain Johnson. For the first time, the mayor seemed unsure. Rick, he said to his assistant, what do you think? Richard Bell had been quiet during the meeting. Now he looked uncomfortable. Sir, if what Captain Johnson says is true, especially about the Wilson's Market incident, this could be very bad for the city. And for your administration. The mayor rubbed his face. I need to think about this. He turned to Captain Johnson. The suspensions will stand for now. But this isn't over. Captain Johnson nodded. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor. As he left City Hall, Captain Johnson felt both relief and worry. He had won this round, but the mayor was a powerful enemy, and Tanner was still determined to fight back. When he returned to the station, Officer Rodriguez was waiting for him. How did it go with the mayor? She asked. Not great, Captain Johnson admitted, but we're still moving forward. Good, Rodriguez said, because we just got a call about Sergeant Wilkes. He's making trouble at Joey's bar on the east side, and he's in uniform. Captain Johnson sighed. One battle won, another just beginning. Captain Johnson and Officer Rodriguez drove quickly to Joey's bar on the east side. The small bar was on a corner with neon signs in the windows. Even from outside, they could hear loud voices. Wait for backup, Captain Johnson told Rodriguez as they parked. Chen and Willis are 2 minutes away, Rodriguez replied, checking her radio. Inside Joey's bar, Sergeant Wilkes sat at the counter. He had clearly been drinking. His uniform shirt was unbuttoned at the top, and his face was red. Around him, customers watched nervously. The bartender, an older man with gray hair, stood back, looking worried. You people need to show more respect to the police, Wilkes was saying loudly. We keep this neighborhood safe. An older black man at a nearby table spoke up. Safe. You and your friends have been taking money from shops for years. That's not keeping us safe. Wilkes turned to him, eyes narrow. Careful, old man. Talking like that could get you in trouble. The door opened. Captain Johnson walked in, with Rodriguez behind him. The room went quiet. Sergeant Wilkes, Captain Johnson said calmly, I think you've had enough for tonight. Wilkes spun around on his stool. Well, if it isn't the captain. Come to join me for a drink. No, Captain Johnson said. I'm here to take you home. You're in uniform, Sergeant. This is against department rules. Wilkes laughed. Rules? You love your rules, don't you, Captain? But rules are for people who don't understand how the real world works. Captain Johnson stepped closer. Stand up, Sergeant. We're leaving. I don't think so, Wilkes said. I'm not done with my drink. Just then, Officers Chen and Willis entered the bar. They stood by the door, waiting for Captain Johnson's orders. The customers watched silently. Many had taken out their phones and were recording what was happening. Sergeant Wilkes, Captain Johnson said, his voice still calm but firm, you have two choices. You can come with me now, or I can place you under arrest for public intoxication while in uniform. Either way, you're leaving this bar. Wilkes stood up slowly. He was a big man, taller than Captain Johnson. You think you've won, don't you? Taking down Tanner, getting the mayor to back off. But you don't know this city like we do. You don't know what's coming. What's coming, Sergeant? Captain Johnson asked. Wilkes smiled, but his eyes were cold. Tomorrow's newspaper, for one thing. A friend of mine at the City Times is running a big story about you, about how you're ruining the 12th precinct, about how crime is up since you took over. Is crime up? Captain Johnson asked. Or are we just reporting it honestly now, instead of hiding it? Wilkes ignored the question. The story also mentions how you spend a lot of time in the East Side. Special interest in this neighborhood, Captain, or just the people here. Captain Johnson understood the suggestion. Wilkes was implying that Captain Johnson favored the mostly black and Hispanic East Side neighborhood because he was black. I spend time where there are problems to fix, Sergeant, Captain Johnson said. And right now, you're the problem. The people in the bar were still recording with their phones. Captain Johnson was glad. These videos would show exactly what happened. Officers Chen and Willis, he said, please escort Sergeant Wilkes to the car. He's suspended, effective immediately, pending a review for public intoxication while in uniform and intimidation of civilians. Wilkes's face turned even redder. You can't do that. I just did, Captain Johnson said. Your badge and gun, please. For a moment, everyone thought Wilkes might fight. He was bigger than any of the officers there, but then his shoulders dropped. He took off his badge and handed it over, along with his gun. This isn't over, he muttered as Chen and Willis let him out. After they left, the bar was quiet. Then the old man who had spoken up earlier approached Captain Johnson. Never thought I'd see the day, he said. Someone finally standing up to them. The bartender came over too. Those officers have been causing trouble here for years, taking free drinks, scaring customers. No one would stop them. Captain Johnson took out his card. If either of you want to make an official statement, call me. We need people willing to speak up. As Captain Johnson left the bar, people nodded respectfully to him. A young woman said, "Thank you, Captain." Others murmured agreement. Back at the station, Captain Johnson added Sergeant Wilkes's badge to the growing collection on his desk. 3 officers suspended in 1 week. It was a start, but the hardest part was still to come. His phone rang. It was Chief Adams. "Captain, we have a problem," the chief said. "The newspaper is running a story tomorrow attacking you and your methods, and the police union is calling for your removal." The battle was getting bigger, but Captain Johnson was ready. 3 months passed. The battle for the 12th Street Police Station had been hard, but Captain Johnson was winning. The newspaper story attacking him had backfired. The same day it came out, videos from Joey's bar appeared online. People saw how calmly Captain Johnson had handled Sergeant Wilkes. They saw the respect he showed to everyone, and how he stood up against a corrupt officer. The police union had backed down when Officer Diaz testified about the Wilson's market trap. Internal Affairs found evidence that Tanner, Harris, and Wilkes had broken rules for years. All three were fired from the police force. Tanner and Harris faced criminal charges for the Wilson's market incident. Mayor Wilson, seeing which way the wind was blowing, suddenly became Captain Johnson's biggest supporter. "This is exactly the kind of leadership I wanted when I appointed Captain Johnson," he told reporters, forgetting how he had tried to stop the captain's work. On a sunny Monday morning, Captain Johnson stood before his officers for their regular meeting. The room looked different now. There were new faces, young officers who reflected the community they served. Women and people of color who had been passed over for promotion before were now in leadership positions. "Good morning," Captain Johnson said. "Today marks 3 months since we began our new approach at the 12th. I want to share some numbers with you." He turned to the whiteboard and wrote, "Complaints against officers, down 70%. Arrest rates in East Side, down 15%. Violent crime, down 25%. Community tips leading to arrests, up 60%. Officer injuries, down 30%. These numbers tell a story," Captain Johnson continued. "When we treat all neighborhoods and all people with respect, they trust us. When they trust us, they help us. When they help us, we all get better results." Officer Rodriguez, now Sergeant Rodriguez, nodded in agreement. Next to her, Officer Chen, recently promoted to detective, smiled proudly. "We've made progress," Captain Johnson said, "but we still have work to do. Some officers from the old days are still adjusting. Some community members still don't trust us. Change takes time." After the meeting, Captain Johnson worked at his desk. There was a knock at his door. "Come in," he called. A man entered, one of the older officers who had been close to Tanner and Wilkes. Officer Collins had stayed quiet during all the changes, neither supporting nor opposing Captain Johnson. "Captain, do you have a minute?" Collins asked. "Of course. Have a seat." Collins sat down but looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to say, I was wrong about you." Captain Johnson waited, letting the officer speak at his own pace. "When you first came, I thought you were just trying to make a name for yourself," Collins continued. "Or maybe you had something against us, but I've seen how things have changed. The station runs better now. Officers are happier. And the people out there," he gestured toward the window, "they respect us more." "Thank you for telling me," Captain Johnson said. "It takes courage to change your mind." Collins nodded. "I'm retiring next month, 30 years on the force. But I wanted you to know, I'm glad my last months are under your command." After Collins left, Captain Johnson walked to the window. From his office, he could see people walking on the street. A woman waved to an officer on patrol. A shop owner chatted with a police car driver. Small things, but important. Signs of trust being rebuilt. His phone rang. It was Chief Adams. "Captain, I have some news," the chief said. "The commissioner is retiring next year. The mayor wants to put your name forward as his replacement." Captain Johnson was surprised. "Commissioner, that's a big step. The mayor thinks you're the right person to bring the changes you've made at the 12th to the entire police force," Chief Adams said. "And frankly, so do I." After hanging up, Captain Johnson sat quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. When he first arrived at the 12th, officers like Tanner and Wilkes thought their badges made them untouchable. They couldn't imagine taking orders from a black man. They couldn't imagine that the rules applied to them. Now, 3 months later, those officers were gone. The station was transformed, and Captain Johnson, maybe soon Commissioner Johnson, was just getting started. Change was possible. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. But with courage and determination, even the most entrenched systems could be reformed. Captain Johnson picked up a framed photo on his desk. The original officers of the 12th Precinct from the 1960s. All white men, standing stiffly in their uniforms. Next to it was a new photo. The current officers of the 12th. Women and men of all races, standing together. 6 decades of change, but the last 3 months had changed the most. It was a good start. Captain Johnson smiled and got back to work. There was still much to do.